Have you ever had the feeling that you're always running, but not getting anywhere? It's as if life has become an endless treadmill. You wake up, you work, you fulfill your responsibilities, you dream of afterward, but that after never arrives. Maybe you think, when I get that job, when I have enough money, when I retire, yes, then I'm going to really live. But what if I told you that this thought is a trap? That this constant waiting for an ideal moment is actually making you waste what is most precious to you, the now? Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you, and perhaps even change the way you view time, happiness, and the meaning of your life. Alan Watts, one of the most provocative and profound philosophers of the 20th century, warned us about this with almost disconcerting clarity. He said that life is not a journey with a final destination. It is not a ladder you climb until you finally get there. Life, according to Watts, is like music. The grace is not in the last note, but in the dance of each chord. Beauty is not in the destination, but in the melody you choose to live now. And even knowing this, even feeling that there's something wrong with this automatic way of life, many remain stuck in this endless cycle of waiting, because we've been conditioned this way. From a young age, we learn that life is a sequence of goals: school, college, career, marriage, children, retirement, and that's it. After from this, if everything goes well, comes such freedom. But does that make sense? How many times have you found yourself thinking, I'm not living the way I want to yet, but I'll get there someday? And does that there have a set date? Or does it move every time you think you've gotten close? This mindset is subtle but destructive. It robs you of presence. It makes you see life as a means to something that hasn't yet happened. And that's precisely where the waste begins. Because while you wait for the perfect life real is passing. In every little moment ignored, in every breath you take for tomorrow, in every smile you didn't see because you were too busy with what's still missing. Have you ever been through this? Maybe it's happening right now, as you watch this video. And if so, you've already taken the first step. Because the simple act of questioning this logic already puts you ahead of many people who still live on autopilot. Alan Watts wasn't just talking about philosophical ideas to sound clever. He was talking about awakening, to remember that living is a verb in the present, not a future promise. And understanding this can be the beginning of a true personal revolution. The truth is that this cycle, this waiting disguised as planning, masks itself as responsibility, maturity, even success. It's as if we've been trained to believe that we can only truly to live when all pending issues are resolved. But here's a secret that few have the courage to admit. These pending issues never end. There will always be a new bill, a new deadline, a new goal. And if you don't wake up now, you risk going through this entire life with the constant feeling that something is still missing. Alan Watts saw this with almost poetic clarity. He said that we treat life as if it were an endless prelude to something great yet to come. But the music of existence is already playing, and it's meant to be danced to now, not later. If you're feeling that knot in your chest, that subtle restlessness, as if you finally put a name to something that's always bothered you, then maybe you're ready to stop. Stop chasing the unattainable and start truly looking at what's already here. Presence, consciousness, life in its simplest and most intense form. And if this message is making sense to you, if in some way this video is touching parts of your soul that were dormant, I want to extend an invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel now. Not only because it helps the content reach more people, but because by subscribing you choose to continue this journey. A journey of waking up to life, of thinking differently, of connecting with ideas that truly transform. Here we don't just talk about philosophy. We talk about live with purpose, feel with presence, think deeply. So if this resonates with you, subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any reflections like this. Because this trap of constant waiting isn't just a matter of habit. It's become part of our mindset. We grow up surrounded by messages that reinforce the idea that life is just beginning. After college, after marriage, after stability, after success. As if now we're just preparation, a poorly rehearsed rehearsal for a show that never opens. But what if life is just this here? What if the hidden truth is that the future we so long for is a carefully constructed illusion to keep us busy, controllable, and disconnected from the present? Alan Watts used to say that the problem most people face is that They confuse the map with the territory. In other words, they live according to a mental projection, what they'll do, what they'll be, what they'll achieve, and forget to look at where they're standing now. It's like walking through a forest with a map in hand but blindfolded. The map may show the way, but it's the real experience, the direct contact with the earth, the smell of the leaves, the sound of the wind, that makes the journey worthwhile. Have you ever noticed how even in the simplest moments we feel distracted, trapped in other dimensions of time? Just look, the family is gathered around the table, eating dinner, and yet our eyes are on our cell phones, responding to messages, watching short videos, planning what to do after dinner. In other words, the body is present but the soul left long ago. And that's why so many people say life seems to be passing too quickly. It's not that time has flown by, it's that you haven't been there, leave to live it. And this brings us to an even deeper point, the valorization of doing over being. We live in a culture that exalts those who are always busy, always running, always producing, as if our value were directly linked to how much we can deliver. But Alan Watts invites us to turn this logic upside down. He reminds us that it is not what you do. You are what you and, when everything you do is taken away from you. And this, for many people, is uncomfortable, because it's easier to hide behind busy schedules than to face the emptiness of silence. It's easier to define yourself as a professional, an entrepreneur, a results producer, than to simply admit, I'm human. And the most curious and painful thing is that the more we cling to productivity as our identity, the further we move away from what truly matters. How many people do you know who work tirelessly at something they don't love? Who spend years in meaningless jobs just because it's what's available today? But that today stretches on for decades, until one day you wake up and realize you've spent most of your existence living a life that wasn't even yours, chasing goals you didn't even choose, repeating patterns you learned but never questioned. Alan said, "It is better to have a short and purposeful life than a long and empty one." And this echoes like an uncomfortable whisper for those who have lived solely out of obligation. Because deep down, you know, there's no point in a high salary if you come home emotionally drained. There's no point in having status if, inside, you feel lost. There's no point in fulfilling all of society's checklists if every step takes you further away from who you truly are. But the good news is that transformation begins right where you are. It doesn't require major external revolutions. It begins with small gestures, almost invisible, but profoundly impactful. Watts spoke of the beauty of the now, and he wasn't talking about a forced, mystical, unattainable presence. He was talking about something much more accessible: stopping, breathing, observing, coming back to yourself. He said that being present is like learning to swim in a current. It's not about fighting against it, but about learning to flow with it, about letting go, about allowing yourself to exist without resistance. And being present is a practice. It's not something that happens automatically. It's an invitation you need to accept every day. And sometimes, several times a day. It can start with 5 minutes of silence, observing your thoughts like someone observing the sky, without judging, without trying to change anything, just being. It can be doing something you love, without rushing, without looking at the clock, or even disconnecting for an hour, without notifications, without distractions, just existing in the now. Does that seem like a small amount? It might be, but sometimes it's in that small amount that everything resides. Of course, none of this is easy, because change requires courage. It requires facing the discomfort of leaving an automatic way of life and looking truth in the eye. It requires abandoning the role of victim of time and assuming the leading role of a unique journey. But that's where the magic happens. It's when you choose to stop surviving and finally start living. Alan said the only way to deal with change is to dive into it, move with it, and join the dance. And to do that, you have to let go of the illusion of control, of the paralyzing fear, of the need to anticipate every step. Because truly living is trusting. It's entering life like someone entering the sea, without being certain of anything, but with your whole soul ready to feel everything. So I ask you with all sincerity, are you ready for this? Are you ready to live, not in the future, not in the ideal, but there, exactly as life is asking you right now? Because this question is a game changer, and maybe, just maybe, answering it honestly is the most important decision you can make. Alan Watts left us some simple, almost silent advice, but with a weight that transcends time. The only thing that is real is this moment. Everything else is illusion. And if that's true, and everything indicates that it is, then what are we waiting for? Because there's a crucial point in this journey of awakening that almost no one talks about, the fear of losing control. And this silent fear is often what most prevents us from living authentically. We get so used to routine, to predictable patterns, to the feeling that everything is under control, that any attempt at change seems dangerous. But deep down, what we call control is just an illusion we invent to feel safe. Alan Watts said that life cannot be controlled, it can only be lived. And that the more we try to master it, the further we distance ourselves from it. Because living isn't about gripping the steering wheel tightly, it's about releasing the handbrake and letting the flow guide us. And this idea, though simple, is profoundly transformative. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself trying to predict every scenario before making a decision? How many opportunities have you let slip by because you wanted to guarantee it would work before you even started? This perfectionism disguised as responsibility is a silent thief of life. It convinces us that the time isn't right yet, that we need more preparation, more stability, more guarantees. But the truth is that perfect time will never come, because the only time that exists is already here. It's now. Change, when accepted, is liberating, but when resisted, it becomes a burden. And many people spend their entire lives carrying this weight. The weight of a life they didn't choose, the weight of a script they didn't write, the weight of an identity they constructed to please others, parents, bosses, teachers, followers, and which ultimately has nothing to do with who they truly are. Alan reminded us that the first step to living truthfully is to abandon the roles we've been given. It's having the courage to be, even when it means being different, even when it means going against the grain, even when no one understands, and it's okay if they don't. Because your life doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be felt. And the curious thing is that, when you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you finally begin to be you, without masks, without shields, without pressure to meet expectations. And that's when a freedom emerges that can't be bought, nor taught in books, nor achieved with diplomas. It's an internal freedom, a state of lightness, of presence, of belonging to yourself. Most people only begin to reflect on this when they experience disruptions, losses, crises, when something out of the ordinary happens and the artificial structure crumbles. But you don't have to wait for life to shake you awake. You can choose to do so now, out of your own free will, out of awareness, out of a desire to live a story that truly makes sense to you. And perhaps you're wondering, but how do I do this in practice? The answer isn't complex. It's a return to the essentials. Alan Watts said that being present is, above all, be whole in what you do, whether it's washing the dishes, walking down the street, or having a coffee. It's about removing mental noise and returning to what's in front of you, with attention, with openness, with real presence. This doesn't require much effort. It requires intention and repetition, a silent practice of coming back to yourself. You can start today, right now, while listening to me. Close your eyes for a few seconds. Take a deep breath and notice where you are. What do you feel in your body? What do you hear around you? What's going through your mind? Just observe. Don't try to control anything. Just feel. This is the beginning. Simple, yet powerful. And as you reconnect with this place of presence, something subtle begins to shift. Haste gives way to clarity. Anxiety diminishes. The world doesn't stop, but you stop being dragged along by it. It's as if you stop being a spectator of your own life and become the author again. And in this role of author, you gain something rare: choice. You stop living on autopilot and start making conscious choices. You wake up with purpose. You speak with intention. You create with meaning. And when that happens, everything takes on a new color. Your relationship with time changes. The weight of obligations dissolves. Even challenges seem lighter because now you're whole. And a whole person does not despair in the face of uncertainty. They dance with it. But of course, this dance isn't rehearsed. It demands surrender. And surrender only happens when you let go of your defenses. When you accept that you don't have to have all the answers, follow all the rules, or please everyone. Alan said that the secret to life is not finding security, but making insecurity a habitable place. And when you understand this, something inside you relaxes. Urgency disappears. Fear diminishes. And what remains is a quiet, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly powerful sensation. Peace. Peace in being exactly where I'm supposed to be. Peace in not needing to prove anything. Peace in knowing that life isn't a race but a dive. And this dive is yours alone, because there's something else here, something you may never have heard so clearly. You don't have to become anything to be worthy of living fully, and that, in itself, contradicts almost everything we have been taught. Our whole lives we have been conditioned to believe that it's only when we reach certain milestones, an ideal body, a respected career, an enlightened mind, a perfect routine, that we'll be ready to live in peace. But this is the most subtle and dangerous lie of all, that you're not enough, that you need get there to only then deserve lightness, which still has to fix yourself, to improve, to evolve, so that you can breathe easy. But what if I told you that this there never existed, that everything you're trying to achieve is already somehow available in the present moment, even if in seed form? Alan Watts told us something brilliant. We don't come into the world, we emerge from it, like a wave from the ocean. This changes everything, because if we are an extension of life itself, why do we insist on living as if we were outside of it, as if we were always trying arrive in life, when in fact we are her, happening, unfolding, breathing through us? This dismantles the false ideal of future perfection. It shows that transformation doesn't depend on external achievements, but on an internal shift in perception. It's about moving from the role of someone in search of something to the role of someone who welcomes what already is, and this turning point is liberating. But the mind resists, because the mind was shaped to make sense, to follow logic, order, linear progress. And life doesn't work that way. Life is spiraling. It's rhythmic. It's dancing chaos. And accepting this may be uncomfortable at first, but it eventually becomes an inexhaustible source of relief. Think about your biggest frustrations to date. How many of them were born from an expectation of how should be? How many times have you suffered because life didn't follow the script you wrote? And looking back, how many of those twists and turns you rejected at the time ended up leading you to better, or at least truer places? We need to talk about this obsession with control that robs us of joy, the desire to predict everything, to plan every detail, to avoid risks, mistakes, and failures. But what are you really avoiding when you try to control everything? Pain, rejection, failure, or the simple truth that life by nature is unpredictable? Watts invites us to make peace with this impermanence, to see that what hurts us isn't the flow of things, it's our resistance to that flow. It's trying to swim against the current, when all we need is to learn to float. And floating in this sense isn't about giving up, it's about trusting. It's about letting go of the moorings. It's about stopping using your mind as a shield and starting to use your heart as a compass. And this doesn't mean abandoning your plans, but rather ceasing to treat the future as the only place where life is worthwhile. Because often, what imprisons us most is exactly what we were promised as freedom. Working more to achieve more, to buy more, to experience more. An infinite equation that never adds up, because you'll always feel like something's missing. Always. Until he decides to break out of this cycle. Until he decides to stop running. Until he chooses to sit down. Not because he's reached the top, but because he realizes that you don't need any top to be at peace. Peace is not the end of the journey. Peace is the journey. And this brings us to an even more intimate point, the fear of disappointing others. How many times have you suppressed a true desire just to keep up appearances? How many times have you pretended to be fine, afraid of upsetting someone? How many times have you said yes because you were afraid of saying no? This fear of not living up to expectations, of disappointing, of stepping outside of socially accepted roles. This is the fear that keeps many lives silent. Inner silence, emotional silence, silence of one's own essence. And when you silence your truth for too long, you begin to feel absent within yourself, as if you've lost access to your own center. Alan Watts reminds us that liberation begins when you understand that you don't have to represent anything, that the value of being alive isn't in meeting expectations, but in living in alignment with who you truly are. No makeup, no performance, no molds. And when you start living this way, from your truth, something aligns almost invisibly. Relationships change, work changes, the way you wake up, the way you breathe, the way you talk. To people, everything changes. Because you're no longer trying to be. You are being. And perhaps at this moment, you're realizing something that's been hidden for a long time. Something that the rush of life kept you from seeing. That deep down, what you wanted most wasn't success, recognition, or perfection. It was simply be present, feel, connect, be. And this now is within your reach. Because when we begin to understand this silent truth, that everything we've ever sought is already here, in the now, a kind of emptiness begins to dissolve. That internal hole we try to fill with achievements, distractions, external validations, it begins to lose strength, because we finally stop entertaining the idea that life happens outside, and we begin to touch something much more subtle and true. Life happens here inside, but there's one detail. It's scary. It's scary because most of us have become accustomed to defining ourselves by what we do, by what we deliver, by what we achieve. And when all of that is set aside, even for a moment, what's left? Who are you when you're not trying to prove anything to anyone? Who are you when you're not demanding anything of yourself, comparing yourself, or competing? Who are you in silence? These questions are uncomfortable because they touch on a layer of yourself that has been forgotten, ignored, and sometimes even stifled. But they are also liberating, because it is precisely there, in this raw, unfiltered space, that the reconnection with your essence begins. The thing that was always there, before the world told you who you should be. Alan Watts said that the ego is an illusion, a mental construct, a persona we believe ourselves to be, but which deep down has no real substance. He said, "We try to cling, but all we get is an image, and we mistake that image for our true identity." This changes the way we deal with failures, imperfections, and the idea of success. Because from the moment you understand that, you're not this character, that you're something much bigger, broader, freer, everything shifts. You begin to realize that you can make mistakes and remain whole, that you can change your mind, your path, your dreams, and still remain at peace. Because your essence is not at stake. It never was. But here comes another delicate point. Society does not value being. It values the to-do we are celebrated when we are useful, productive, and efficient. And this creates a cycle of validation so deep that even rest needs to be justified. Have you noticed this? We feel guilty for not doing anything, for simply existing, as if the simple act of to be was not enough. This is the invisible weight we carry, the constant obligation to justify ourselves, to show service, to prove our worth. And it is this weight that little by little disconnects us from the present, because while we are trying to become something, we stopped perceive us. Watts provokes us by saying that life is like a dance, and dancing isn't about getting somewhere, it's about enjoying the movement. But many of us are so busy thinking about the next step, the next choreography, the perfect performance, that we forget to dance. That's why so many people reach the end of the day exhausted, not because they lived too much, but because they lived out of himself. Because you spent all your energy trying to be accepted, trying to measure up, trying to live up to an ideal that, deep down, doesn't even make sense. And all of this creates a very common symptom: emptiness. That silent feeling that despite doing everything right, something is still missing. This is the sign that you're following a path that isn't yours, that your compass is pointing outward when it should be pointing inward. The good news is that it's not too late to change that. You can start now, by truly breathing, by observing your thoughts without clinging to them, by allowing yourself to feel, even if the feeling isn't pretty, even if it's confusing. It's in this permission that freedom is born. The freedom to be human, to be whole, to be present. And being present doesn't mean being happy all the time. It means being fully present in whatever happens. It means not running away, not hiding behind distractions, not numbing yourself with speed, but being there, even when it hurts, even when it bothers, because even pain, when accepted consciously, transforms. Even confusion, when embraced, reveals wisdom. That's the beauty of now. It's imperfect, but true. And only in what's true is there the possibility of real transformation. Alan Watts said the secret isn't to fight what we are, but to reconcile ourselves with it, to accept impermanence, chaos, and duality. Because when you stop resisting, something very special happens. The world begins to open up. You stop repeating unconscious patterns. You stop chasing other people's approval, You stop putting yourself last. And in this space, a new perspective on everything emerges, on life, on time, on yourself. You begin to see that you don't need anything else to begin, that the journey doesn't begin when everything is ready, but exactly when you decide to stop procrastinating. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop hiding behind the excuse of later. The after is a place where dreams die. The now is the only place where life really happens. So if at any point you felt like you were just repeating the days, living on autopilot, disconnected from yourself, this is the call. A call to return, to breathe, to live with more presence, more lightness, more awareness. And you don't need to make big external changes. It starts with small internal choices. Choices that only you can make, and that no one can take away from you. If you've made it this far, really, that already says a lot about you, because not everyone allows themselves to dive that deep. Most people stop at the surface, get distracted, and move on to the next video. But you stayed. And that shows there's something inside you asking for more truth, more presence, more connection with your own life. And I'm so happy to have been a part of that with you. If this content touched you in any way, if it made you think, if it lit up even the smallest light, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we continue this journey slowly, deeply, and without rushing to get there. Each video is another step on this path back to yourself. And please leave a like, not just for the content, but for the exchange we've built here. This helps keep this space alive and allows more people to find this kind of conversation, which, let's face it, is so rare these days. Oh, and if you're with me until the end, comment below. That message was for me. I'd love to know who walked this far. There's a video here that complements this topic and can further deepen this awakening. Click and stay with me there. We'll see you on the next step of this journey.